Hey guys, welcome back to the Grant Mitt Podcast, episode number 76. Got a special guest, Pete O'Haron. He is the founder and CEO of FibroBiologics. Actually NASDAQ listed. They just had a direct listing IPO. So congratulations there. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Great to have me.
Absolutely. So first off, tell me, you've been an entrepreneur for how long now?
Wow. Well, my undergraduate and graduate degrees were both in hospital administration, so I thought I was going to be working in the walls of a hospital for the rest of my career.
Okay.
But what you find with doctors and surgeons in particular is that they're all natural inventors, they're all natural entrepreneurs. And so I was into my career about 8 years, and a group of surgeons came to me and said, hey, we want to build a nice arena in Houston. We would like you to help us build it. And I said, I know nothing about that. And they said, well, take some time off from the hospital and see if it works. And so I asked the group I was working for if I could have 6 months. If it didn't work, I would come back. But we built the biggest ice arena in Houston. And then one of the doctors met someone who had an instrument that they wanted to develop. He said, go see Pete over at the ice arena. He showed up, and I love the instrument. So we set off on an R&D and product development path, and I've never looked back.
Amazing. So tell me about your company. So you guys just went public. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but tell me about what you guys do and what are some of the things that you're working on.
So I like to say we're kind of stem cells 2.0. So the cell therapy revolution really started in 2012 when Dr. Yamanaka from Japan created the first induced pluripotent stem cell. Doing that, he won the Nobel Prize. And so that set off the next 10-year craze for stem cells. The irony is that he used a fibroblast to create the stem cell, and we work in fibroblasts. And so since then, you've seen Dr. Jim Allison from MD Anderson won the Nobel Prize for immunotherapy for cancer, another 10-year run with immunotherapy for cancer. And most recently, Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuelle Charpentier won the Nobel Prize for CRISPR. So you're seeing a lot of people moving in that CRISPR direction. But we work with fibroblasts in the same way that most companies work with stem cells. But fibroblasts are the most abundant cell in the human body. They actually outnumber stem cells 5,000 to 1. They're more potent than stem cells. They're easier to harvest than stem cells. They're easier to regrow than stem cells. So it's just a much better cell source. And while everyone was chasing stem cells, we were chasing fibroblasts.
And what does that look like and you guys have done tons of patents, you've done tons of research and discovered a lot of incredible things. What is that go to market? What is that going to look like over the next, would it be a decade, or how long is that going to take? What was that going to look like?
Yeah, hopefully sooner than that. When we started, we were just working in the spine. So we inject a fibroblast into the disc in the spine. And every time you stand up and sit down, you create this intermittent hydrostatic pressure between the two vertebrae. And it tells that fibroblast to turn into a chondrocyte or a cartilage type cell. So that's where we started. And we had acquired a provisional patent from a neurosurgeon, and his wife was a dermatologist, and they had this initial idea. As we were pursuing that, we started seeing that it might work in other areas. So I challenged our scientists to go out and explore every possible area, and it was a virtual explosion of discovery. So at this point, I've probably written over 300 patents on this. We start all organically written, and we started with one provisional. So I would say we probably have more patents in the biologic area than just about anybody. We certainly have more related to fibroblasts. We have more patents than the rest of the world combined.
What type of specific areas are you guys utilizing fibroblasts? What are some things that you guys are going to be able to do for people with that technology, or hoping to do?
So when we had this collection of patents, IP, and the work we'd done in the clinic, we broke away kind of the crown jewels for the purpose of taking it public and doing a larger human trial. So we brought over to FibroBiologics degenerative disc disease, orthopedics, multiple sclerosis, and cancer. Since we formed FibroBiologics and prior to going public, we found began working in chronic wound care, psoriasis for the immune system, and our newest program is thymic involution. If you interviewed 100,000 people, you would never hear the words thymic involution. The thymus gland is right here behind the breastplate, and what we're doing When you get into your 50s and 60s and 70s, it starts to shut down. And it's kind of the teaching center for the immune system. So you've heard of T cells before. Those are thymic cells. And so your body, the reason you're so healthy in your 30s and 40s and early 50s is because your thymus gland is teaching the immune system what are the good cells and what are the malignancies. But when you get into your 60s and 70s, you don't have more cancer than you had in your 40s. It's just that your body stops recognizing it. So we're the only company in the world working on regrowing and regenerating that thymus gland. If we can achieve that, we could keep humans alive another 10 or 15 years.
How, and that's what I was about to kind of ask is, you know, I hear so much about all these different things that all these different private companies and now public companies are doing to eventually extend human life, cure cancer. How far out do you think a cure for cancer is?
Well, cancer is so complex. It's so difficult. Even when you have two of the same forms of cancer, it reacts differently in the human body.
Managing your sales pipeline can be a ton of work. I've been an entrepreneur for the last 5 years, and managing all of my company's deals have always been a huge headache. Luckily, I found a CRM that can help solve this issue with Pipedrive. Pipedrive is used by over 100,000 clients nationwide, and they've helped companies all across the world increase their efficiency and improve their sales. Click the link below to get a free 30-day trial plus 20% off your order.
And so what you saw with Dr. Allison is he's taught the immune system to kill the cancer. So what we have with chemotherapy, and it's all we have right now, so I'm not disparaging anyone doing chemo or undergoing chemo, is really poisoning the body.
Yeah.
And I had a old scientist, he kind of looked like Albert Einstein, come up to me at a conference, and he said, you know what, we're going to look back at the last 50 years of chemotherapy as the medieval equivalent of bloodletting. And I said, you're right, but it's all we have. Well, the difference between you not having cancer and me having cancer is our immune systems. And during this interview, your body will have 30,000 defective actions happening, and your body's curing those defective actions. When it doesn't cure it, when it fails to see it and you get a mutation, that's where you get the malignancy. So it's a very, very complex issue. I think cancer, you'll see a lot of progress in immunotherapy for cancer. The area that we work in is our fibroblasts can turn on and help cancer, or they can turn off the fibroblasts. So there's a good one and a bad one, and our good ones can turn the bad ones off. That's the theory on our work in cancer. So they're figuring out
how to keep them where they're helping and not hurting.
That's right. That's right. And what you really want to do with the cancer is you want to expose it to the immune system. So in our work, we're going to take fibroblasts to take away the shield that cloaks it from the immune system. And once you take it away, nothing cures the body faster than the body itself.
Mm-hmm. I heard, I listened to some type of podcast that you were on, and I loved what you said. I hope I said it right, but that Big Pharma has never created something that was not from originally within the body has cured anything. Something along the lines of that.
We've done the research, and in the last 60 years of Big Pharma, there have been no cures for chronic diseases. I mean, think about that. Think of the trillions of dollars that have been spent on research. Now, I don't, again, disparage my Big Pharma brethren. I used their products this morning before I left the house. You need it for high blood pressure and cholesterol, and so it's the best we have right now. But they have never cured a chronic disease. And you think about it, it's almost really the height of human arrogance to think that we as a species can create a man-made chemical compound and insert it into the body, and it's going to cure a biologic defect. It will never happen. Mm-hmm. The cure for a biologic defect will come from cell therapy, immunotherapy, or gene therapy. It will come from the internal biologic process will cure that biologic defect. It's the only thing that can happen.
You break down in a simple way so you said cell therapy, like what does that look like in a simple basic?
So cell therapy right now, as we know it, is usually stem cells.
Okay.
So they're taking stem cells and they're using them to lower inflammation. They're using it for degenerative disc disease, where it's regrowing the disc. So that's kind of the pure cell therapy play. Immunotherapy is where you're enhancing the immune system. So you're heightening its awareness so it can do its job. If you have a fully functioning immune system, there's very little that can hurt your body. Gene therapy is really taking those genetic defects and it's it's fixing them. It's reversing the genetic defect through a gene cutting process called CRISPR. So that's the newest one out there. And so everyone will play their role. Fibroblasts, where we work, just have they do a much better job at lowering inflammation, and went political on you with inflation, lowering inflammation. They do a much better job on that. They do a much better job growing cartilage type cells than stem cells. And they're just a better, more robust, more potent cell source.
Is any of this FDA approved and being actively used yet, or is it just all in the works?
So there's not really a cell therapy approved yet. I think a company called Mesoblast will probably get approval on one of their products this year, and not to single them out, but I can't wait for someone to get approval. It will really it'll lead the whole charge forward. So we're rooting for everybody in that. CRISPR just received their first approval. A company called CRISPR Therapeutics, CEO there's a Sam Kilcarney, and he just received approval for sickle cell anemia. Had remarkable results.
Really?
So impressive that the FDA approved them immediately, probably in record time. So I think you'll start to see that. Of course, gene therapy right here in Houston, MD Anderson, Dr. Jim Allison's working on that and has had great results in stage 4 metastatic melanoma. He's done really well with that.
So I've heard that in other countries, though, people are actively using stem cells and other things. Is that true?
They are. I think you can go to Costa Rica, Central America. There's a friend of mine has a place in Mexico that you can go to, and you can get stem cell therapy. There is not a place in the U.S. that's licensed for that. And you'll see some of them. Sometimes you open the paper, and you'll see the word stem cells. Those are not live cells. There's no one in this country that is licensed to do stem cell therapy.
And why? And it's just because of FDA clearance?
You're taking a cell and you are, in their view, you're changing it and then you're reintroducing it into the body. So, of course, they worry about the cell going crazy and forming a malignancy or cancer.
Okay.
So there's a lot of work that needed to be done in that area. But and some of the ones out there, I called them cowboys that were saying they were doing stem cells. They didn't do the background research and the clinical work that the FDA requires to get it public.
Because I heard a story about Tony Robbins was talking about this, and he had, I don't know if it was his back or leg, it was something horrible, and they were going to do this crazy surgery, and it was going to cost a ton of money, and it wasn't going to work, and it was causing issues, and he ended up getting stem cell somewhere in one of these places, like what you're saying, Costa Rica or something, and it just instantly, within just a short period of time, fixed it and healed everything. Is it just they have less stuff? Is the technology good to go already and it's just taking too long?
Well, they just don't have an FDA. They have a little more leeway in what they can do down there. There's a lot of Americans that own those facilities down there that can't open that same facility.
But is it fully healthy, though, is what I'm saying, down there? Do you think it's good and ready to go? Or do you
I've seen a couple of facilities, and they are Class A. I mean, a friend of mine has a facility in Tijuana. And when you say that, you think, well, it's probably going to be lesser than U.S. If you opened your eyes in there, you'd think you were in a U.S. clinic. So there are some good places down there, and I think most of those guys are doing autologous, which is to say you're using your own stem cells and they're manipulating those and putting them back in your body. In the U.S., we do allogenic, which is using your stem cells and giving them to me. And the reason they do that is that you have a little more control over the safety of them. For example, there's not 200 facilities making Advil across the country, right, or Ozempic. There's one manufacturer. The FDA can monitor the safety of that, and they don't license it out for 200 different manufacturing facilities. So that's kind of where stem cells started. And when you do that, you have the different ambient conditions, you have different employees, different equipment, everything is a variable. And so it's hard for the FDA to manage and be able to verify the safety of the manufacturing process for those. So they want you to do it in one place. And then you create what's called a master cell bank. And then from there, you can treat everyone. And when you create a master cell bank, you have to create an allogenic, which is we use donor cells. We create the master cell bank, and from there we distribute.
How far out do you think, and which one, because you guys are doing research and doing a lot of different things, how far out do you think you are from taking something and getting it FDA approved and taking it to market? And which one do you think would specifically do that, or is it too early to
Yeah,
tell?
I would say our chronic wound care is probably going to be the quickest to market. Right after that, you might see a tie between psoriasis and multiple sclerosis. We did 5 patients in multiple sclerosis. We did that work down in Mexico. And we wanted to see, really from a safety standpoint, we're the first people to ever inject allogenic, from me to you, fibroblasts into another human being intravenously. So we didn't know what was going to happen. But these patients had multiple sclerosis, and while it was only 5 patients, it happened in all 5 patients. We stopped the progression of multiple sclerosis. So wherever those patients were on their journey with multiple sclerosis, during our trial with them, it halted the progression.
Crazy.
Again, not statistically significant because there were only 5 patients,
Sure.
but it happened in all 5.
Right. So how did you end up starting this company? Where did this even come about?
So the previous company that I had was an instrument company, and we had taken our instruments to every venture capitalist in the world, and we said, or in this country at least, there was a couple outside of this country.
Yeah.
And I would say, hey, I developed the best instrument system in the world. And they said, no, you didn't. And, well, 25 patents later, we returned 950% to those shareholders, and we were right. So I went back to all those venture capitalists, and I thanked them for their guidance, told them what we had done, and they all said, hey, whatever you do, we're check writers. And one of them called and said, hey, my brother is a French neurologist, neurosurgeon. His wife's a French dermatologist. And they have an idea, but it's way too soon for us. So would you be interested? And I, at that time, had formed an investment group with a core group of guys, and we were looking for our next project. So I was going to all the technology transfer offices at Harvard and Stanford and Rice and all the different ones. And everything I saw was kind of an improved technology. But when I saw this, I said, well, wait a minute, if this works, this is a game changer. So I bought their provisional patent. I brought it back to Houston and placed it with Dr. Tony Mikos at Rice University. And he's a world leader in taking one cell and turning it into another cell. Just happened to be in our backyard. So I said, what do you think about this? He said, well, Pete, I don't know if it'll work, but if it works, it'll probably make worldwide headlines. And a year later, it worked. Yeah. So that's kind of when we were off to the races at that point.
That's interesting. How, growing a company from scratch, you've been an entrepreneur for decades. What does it take starting from zero and then becoming a successful entrepreneur? Like, what are some traits you've noticed in people that have just become extremely successful? What does it take?
You know, it's interesting. I was just telling a friend of mine in Nashville this, but success seems to follow people. So if you're successful in one business, like you're doing media and you've done solar, you could go run a daycare or a tire shop, and it would be a successful daycare and a tire shop. It's a funny thing about success. It just follows that person. And the trait probably is how much they focus and work on that, and how much they're willing to run through the rejections that are ahead and all the negativity that's ahead of them, to be able to plow right through that. And then, you know, I guess if I look back and say to me, the most interesting trait about someone that I want to hire that might have entrepreneurial instincts is curiosity. When you see something, do you tear into it? Do you peel it apart? Are you obsessed with finding out how it works? Do you know everything your competitors are doing? Do you know where they rank versus where you rank? All of that is really important.
Because I've experienced this firsthand being a CEO, and it's just 4 years. You know, you've done it for decades. How do you handle the pressure and the stress with the job?
Yeah, I had a shareholder say one time, I figured out what you do. And I said, what? And he said, anytime that the situation would make the normal person in a fetal position, you're still standing. I said, I love that. Yeah. That's I'm a grinder. Yeah. I just grind it out. And look, you're not physically hurt. No one, you know, I like to say around here, what's the problem? No one's going to jail. Right. It's just an issue. You just have to work through it. But every business that you're in, there are issues that you have to work through, problems that you have to work through, lawsuits that you'll be involved in. I don't care what business you're in. If you're successful and you're moving the marker down the field, someone's going to come after you, and how you deal with all that, compartmentalize that stress. That'll determine how you're able to get through it.
How about being around good people? How do you attract great talent?
I would say early in my career, I would accept less than the best because I thought I could help them, or I thought I could work around any weaknesses, and I just don't do that. I just don't do that anymore. Nope. I hire the best I can possibly find. I hire people that share the same work ethic. If you don't share the same work ethic, if you're not willing to get in the trenches, and I tell my executive team, if you can't sit at a computer and create your own work product, this is going to be a very unhappy place for you to work. Because you can't be someone that we hire who says, I've got to go hire 5 other people. That's how I've been successful over here. I just direct people. I don't really get my hands dirty. It's going to be a really tough place for you. Now, if you are that person, it's going to be the best environment you've ever worked in, because you'll have the freedom to do what you need to do. You can put your imprint on this company, but you have to be able to get in the trenches.
I've just noticed, you see it in the movies, and you assume, and also too, you see it in other companies, that you assume that people just sit up there in the golden castle and they look down, and then they make a decision every 2 weeks. I haven't experienced firsthand that anything gets done like that. I don't even know if that's a real thing.
I have never seen, I think those are glorified images, and some of the entrepreneurs would probably, have someone believe that they're telling a story. I used to say that I think the story behind the real story is always more impressive to me than the story that they're putting out to the public. So, I don't know an easy way to do it. And people, when I raise capital, people always say, "Why is it so hard for you?" It's never easy. I don't know who raising capital is easy for anyone. It's certainly never been easy for me.
Yeah. What's interesting, it's like, just in my experience, is not only the stress, the pressure, but when it's your company, no one's going to push like you.
Right.
No one's going to find a way to get it done, because they can just go get another job, maybe with a little less pressure, maybe around the same pay, maybe more, maybe less. But when it's yours, you have no choice, and you just got to find a way. How do you, and the mistake that I've made, and the reason why I'm asking this is, have you ever hired someone and you realize they're a bad fit? How quick did you get rid of them? Did you ever let someone stay longer than they should? How did you handle that?
Always, they stay longer than they should.
Yeah.
And I think the people around me would probably say, "Oh, you become friends with them, you're too nice to them." And I always answer with, anyone that needed to leave ended up leaving, right? But what terms did they leave on? So, I think the situation weeds itself out, because it is high stress. It is a high work environment. I can't guarantee you I'm not going to call you on your vacation. If you need all that, if you need to break away and have complete separation then I would tell you on your first or second or third interview, this is not the place for you. Am I going to call you every night during dinner? No, I'm not. But if I need something, on the other hand, I don't want to fill out a calendar for your vacation. Go take whatever you need. I don't care. It's going to work itself out. I promise you, you're going to be working while you're on vacation at times. So, don't bring a timesheet to me. Just go take the time off you need.
Right. The biggest mistakes, I've never regretted firing one person yet. I just regretted firing them sooner. And you always know deep down. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to finally admit it to yourself, because you have this deep down hope, because it's in everyone's benefit for them to succeed.
Right.
No one wants it. It doesn't matter if you like them, don't like them. If they are successful, the company is successful. And I would always regret not doing it sooner.
Yeah, I think, was it Jack Welch that said at GE here, when we decide you're not a good fit, we want you to be the first to know. So I like that. Now, I'm not a big termination guy, but I've terminated through the years. I just have to if you're a manager, and I always find it funny because they come back and say, "Well, it's not that he fired me; it's the way he fired me." I've done it on a Monday. I've done it on a Friday. I've done it before Christmas. I've done it after Christmas. I even gave an individual a year notice, and they all ended up saying, "Yeah, but it's just the way he fired me. Why did he wait till Friday if he knew all week long? Or why did he wait? Why did he tell me Monday and let me spend that money this weekend on going to Galveston?" It doesn't matter. Whatever you do they're gonna find a problem with.
And that's just part of the job. And it's just, you do it fast and you keep it moving.
Yeah, and usually they're not happy. I mean, that's where you can really kind of cover it, is just say, "Hi, man, I just do not see it. I don't think you're happy, and I don't want to be the one that's making you unhappy.
And I've had lots of people too that I fired, and maybe they're upset at the time, and then they circle back a year later and thank me.
Yeah, well, I haven't had that.
I've had a lot that didn't either.
I've had someone that quit on us in a really tough spot, and I just kept the lines of communication open, and they came back to the mothership eventually. But I've had that happen.
You just never know. It's so interesting. So what did it take? We were talking previously before. What did it take to take a company public? How hard was that, and what did that look like?
Well, it's tough. When we decided that we wanted to go the public route, of course, you have to make sure that your board is perfect, as good as you can make the board and attract as high caliber people. And I think, I would start with the board. And if you look at our board, if the traditional companies that go public were started with venture capital money, so the board is 90% the venture capitalists that invested. Nothing against those people, but most of them have never run a company. So I said the first criteria for us on our board is I wanted everybody on that board to have made payroll. I wanted them to be in the game. I wanted them to be operational. No one that just, graduated with a Harvard MBA and moved into an analyst role and then eventually got on the board of a company.
They got to know what it was like.
They have to know what it's like, and they have to be currently in the game. So if you go look at our board, these people are, at the top of their field. And we have an expert at rolling out products that could put together a sales force, virtually overnight. We have an expert in business development how does the mergers happen? What's the inside of a merger? We have a rocket scientist on our board. We have an MD on our board who is really special. And then we have a CFO/CEO type of person on our board. So all of these people are fantastic. And then after that, we went over to the scientific advisory board. And we wanted the best in the field that we could get. And I think if people looked at our scientific advisory board, they'd be very impressed. All those people are currently stem cell people. Mm-hmm. We couldn't find anybody that was working in fibroblasts.
Interesting.
So, and then we actually have an astronaut on our SAB, Kate Rubens, and
nice.
She just became, she's a PhD microbiologist, first woman to sequence DNA in space, and she's a fantastic contributor to that. We have the head of Dell Medical School, Claudia Lucanetti, on our scientific advisory board. So once you have your boards in place and you have your advisors in place, then you set about, well, how much money do we need to raise? What's our business plan look like? We need to bring on an executive team. So that takes a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And then while you're doing all that, you're communicating with a hungry shareholder base who wants a liquidity opportunity. So you're doing all this while you're still talking to your shareholders and letting them know what you're doing. And then you have to decide the vehicle. Do you want to do a traditional IPO? You want to reverse into a public shell? Or do you want to do a SPAC? So those are really the ways you can go. And the final way was a direct listing. So SPACs, we're seeing 90% redemption of the investment. So that is to say, you see a $100 million SPAC. When you get to the finish line, there's actually $10 million. You spend that trying to go public. So, and you give up all your warrants. So we moved SPACs aside. That just was not a viable option. Reverse into a public shell, so an existing public shell, yeah, but you reverse into that and you have rogue shareholders showing up out of nowhere with non-dilutive deals written on a napkin. So that wasn't desirable to us. So you had the fully underwritten IPO with one of the larger investment banks. Two issues we saw with that is, one, we didn't get a major venture capitalist in our project, and they look for that. They want to have an institutional investor
that has experience, or
yeah. So we never put that in our project.
They just had angels.
We just had angels, and we even interviewed one of the top investment banks, and they had two co-heads of healthcare investment banking, and one of them said, "Pete, you really don't have any of our friends in your project. We can't take you public." And the other one said, "She's right. We can't take you public, but you should tell your shareholders that you saved them a lot of dilution because you guys did it yourself." So when we saw all those, it kept sending us back to a direct listing, and that's what we ended up with.
And how long ago was that you realized that the route would be a direct listing if you did it?
It was probably a year and a half ago, and then we did a round through Start Engine, and then we were off to the races.
I remember we had talked, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and you were saying that you're planning to go public, and the target originally then was like 6 months or something like that, but the market did tank back then.
Right.
Which might have been a blessing.
And the direct listing is just much more difficult. You have to do everything yourself. You need to get an investment banker who can make the first trade after the market opens. But prior to that, you're doing all the work yourselves. You're filing your S-1s. You're responding to the SEC comments. And it is just it's a slog. It's very, very difficult to do a direct listing.
The legal fees just crazy, huh?
Legal fees are
outrageous.
Unbelievable. And then at the very end, you think, well, I'm ready to get this done and wave our flag. The D&O insurance shows up. And so D&O insurance as a private company could be $30,000. D&O insurance as a public company is $1 million right off the top. So that can be really difficult. So I say that to say NASDAQ said we're only the second company ever in Texas to do a direct listing. It's that difficult.
So what point, walk me through the last 30 days to being a public company. Like, what did it take to get that done?
At that point, we were negotiating with NASDAQ on where they thought our valuation should be, kind of the final pieces. We were answering a couple of final comments on the SEC. Really, it's literally like getting two laser beams to touch, because NASDAQ has to say we're good at the same time that the SEC says we're good. And if you go 2 weeks beyond that, you get this overlap, and the SEC says, well, based on your NASDAQ says, well, based on your bank balance, we need this. And the SEC says, well, based on your bank balance, we need this other thing. So you're constantly trying to get those two laser beams to meet exactly the right time. And it literally happens within the last 48 hours. You get SEC says we have a go. NASDAQ calls and says we have a go. First trade happens within 24 hours.
Okay, so walk me through you finding out. Did y'all just all go to New York next? Like, you didn't know if it was going to happen? Did you already have it planned?
Well, the first trade, we started trading. We didn't ring the bell until 2 weeks later. That was kind of more ceremonial.
Okay.
But the first trade, they said, you're going live tomorrow. And market's open. And
you just get a call or what?
Yeah. You're good to go. And the bankers call you. You have to hire investment bankers to make the first trade. So the bankers call and they say, hey, we're trying to make the first trade, but we don't have enough buyers. And then when they had buyers, they didn't have sellers. And so they said, hey, we don't have equity across both of those. We're trying to match them up. So, it was a very logistical process. But we finally got our first trade. I think it was maybe 11:30, maybe 12, maybe noon. Our first trade happened, and we opened at $1 billion.
What did that feel like?
That was unbelievable. Unbelievable. Because, we've been telling our shareholders through the years, hey, listen, this is possible. We could literally be $1 billion company. We own the fibroblast space. And then we actually closed that day at $1 billion. Now, we've come off our highs a little bit since then, but the fact that we opened and closed at that was really, really special.
And how long was that from you starting the company to taking it public?
3 years.
Damn.
We started the company just to go public. It took 3 years.
Jeez.
It takes that long. We started the company in March of 2021. And between March of 2021 and July, it took me that long to get the board put together. And then I had to go from July until probably November to get the scientific advisory board put together, because you're not just calling someone and saying, hey, we'd love you to be on our scientific advisory board. And they're going, wow, I couldn't wait for you to call. No, they're saying, who are you? I've never met you before. What are you doing? Fibroblasts? Never heard. I've heard of them. I learned about them in school, but nobody's using fibroblasts. They're using stem cells. My whole research is stem cells. So you send them all the papers that you've been working on in fibroblasts, and they come back and go, wow, you guys might have something. I'd like to be on that board. That doesn't happen overnight. It takes weeks and weeks and weeks of communication. So once you have those, then you'd go out and start hiring your executive team. So it is a monumental task.
In your whole business career, did you always want to have a public company? Is it something you ever thought you'd have?
No, I had no idea. And I got a call from one of my current board members who was an existing shareholder. And he said, hey, I've been thinking, I think it's the right time to go public. And that was the seed that started the whole thing. And so the decision at that point was, do you move all of your IP over to this new entity, this new C Corp? And we didn't move all of it. We just brought the crown jewels over because I thought, well, let's don't expose all of that, and it might make us look unfocused if we just bring the entire. I mean, we have a broad IP portfolio. So there was that decision, and then along the way, what bankers were we going to work with, and what pathway we're going to choose. At that time, we were going to go with a SPAC, but SPACs were tanking.
Thank God you didn't do it.
I mean, when we started with the SPAC, I think the redemption rates were 40%. That was maybe May of 2021. And by August 2021, redemption rates were beyond 90%. So at one point I asked the SPAC guys, I said, what are you doing it? Why are you going through the exercise? You have a $200 million SPAC and you end up giving the company less than $20 million. Why are you going through the exercise? Why are you hiring attorneys? Why are you filing all your S-1s? What is that for?
You just need the liquidity, or they just hope?
They just had gone down that path and didn't know a way out of it, I guess. It made no sense to me. I think part of it was they got the warrants, so they got to keep the warrants, but truly that's not enough to go through that whole exercise as far as I was concerned. So SPACs have had a really tough road.
What's the potential? Like, where do you see the company and the valuation, and what could happen as you get to market, you get FDA approval? Yeah,
well, we have platform technologies. I mean, we have platforms inside of a platform. So wound care, for instance. Wound care is an entire platform that covers chronic wounds, chronic injuries to the leg. It covers burns. Eventually, someday you'll see it when you finish surgery. You'll cover it with fibroblasts, and then you'll dress the wound, and that'll heal in half the time. So our current wound program, we tested against the leading product out there for wound care, and we beat it by 50%. We closed the wound in half the time. So you'll see that. You'll see multiple sclerosis lead a full central nervous system, full CNS program platform, and then our thymic involution, our extension of life program could be a whole nother multi-billion-dollar platform.
How long do you think humans are going to start living?
That's a great question. I think I had someone tell me one time, if you can live another 15 years, I can keep you alive to 125. I mean, they stop announcing the people turning 100 on the Today Show because there's just too many of them. I had a friend who was a practicing attorney until he was 100 years old. He died at 103 last year. And I met with him at 100 years old, and he was late for the meeting because he was suing someone at 100. So I literally showed up.
He should have retired.
He was all dapper in a suit. He showed up. He said, "Hey, Pete, I'm sorry I'm late. I was down at the courthouse filing a lawsuit at 100 years old." So, when I was young, 60 seemed really old, and there was a lot of people retiring at 60. Now, coaches are coaching into their 80s. Who knows where it's going to go? If we're successful with the thymus, we can keep you alive a really long time. I don't know what your body's going to look like, but you're going to be healthy inside.
Have you looked into Neuralink, Elon Musk thing?
I've seen that. It's really interesting. I don't know exactly what if they're trying to capture your thoughts or trying to give you thoughts. I don't understand what they're doing with that. I don't know. I don't think it's therapeutic. But it is very interesting.
It's that part, and then what I heard also is that a lot of the issues that happen, like in multiple sclerosis and all those different diseases, it's just a communication between your body. It's missing. It's not being able to communicate.
Yeah.
And so they're saying apparently that's supposed to fix that, but obviously that's so much different than
multiple sclerosis. You have this thing called a myelin sheath, which covers kind of your nerves. It's kind of the insulation over your nerve, and it gets fatigued and broken in parts, so it gets a short circuiting. That's what happens with multiple sclerosis. So to the extent that you can go in and rewire that, or you can regrow that myelin sheath, that's where the success is going to be in multiple sclerosis.
That's incredible. So what has been some of the biggest scares in your business career? Have you ever experienced time where you're like, it's over, it's done?
What?
Or something went right to the end?
It's usually related to the cash balance on hand.
Sure.
How are we going to make payroll?
Right.
And in one company, I made payroll on my credit card 3 cycles in a row.
Yeah.
And when we sold that company, you're having to pay off all your bills and then you distribute to your shareholders. And I put a bill into the mix, and they said, "What is this Visa bill?" I mean, it was, I want to say, $70,000 on Visa. And I said, "That was payroll, the last 3 cycles of payroll." And they said, "I can't believe you put payroll on your credit card." But what were we going to do? We were in the process of selling the company. We couldn't go out and do a raise. There was no money in the bank. It had to be covered somehow. So that was probably the scariest.
And I've heard this saying about entrepreneurs: either you feel like you're making so much money it feels illegal, or you're struggling to make payroll.
Mine is struggling to make payroll.
Yeah.
That's been my career. I had a guy that I was working with in a previous project. He's a mechanical engineer. Brilliant, creative, could have done some great things, but he came in, he's like, "Man, I have 5 kids. I can't leave the mothership." And he worked for a large company. He's like, "I want to do what you do." And I said, "Really?" Because there's no safety net. And he said, "No, I think I'll stay at the mothership." He could have had a great career as an inventor, but some people can't make that adjustment because you're out on a limb. There's no safety net. I mean, you're out there all by yourself. It's not like you can call someone up and say, "Hey, I'm having a bad day. There's no money in the bank." They don't want to hear that.
I don't think it's just such a small percentage of the population, one, could handle that, but also has.
Right.
And I remember explaining this to a family member, and we were at this point in time where we're just absolutely killing it. And we're getting these income wires, and we do all the payroll, and I told them, this is what's left over. And like, damn, that's a lot. And I go, well, no. He's thinking we profited X amount of dollars, $40,000, $50,000 in a week. So no, we lost 20. He's like, how? I'm like, well, next week it's going to be a little bit lower. Still have payroll then. Then we have this cost. We have this cost. We have to spend this much on leads. We have to spend this much here. So really, there's a chance I might have to inject $10,000 or $20,000 into the business.
Right.
And that's what people don't get. And it's interesting, especially if you've been an employee your whole life, or at least at the beginning part of your life, you think almost, and tell me what you think about this. I always think that people who aren't entrepreneurs think about money as like protected blocks. So it's like $10,000 is $10,000 and nothing's going to touch it.
Right.
It's created out of thin air. If that's what you get paid, then it's like perfect. Or if you make this commission, it's like, okay, it's $3,000, it's protected. But you forget that it takes money to acquire that customer. It takes money to pay for all the administrative back-end stuff, the operations. You got to manage the cash flow. You have technology you got to pay for. You have lawyers. You have anything and everything in between. And I don't know, few people figure it out. Just over what has been the biggest mistake or what is something that you wish you knew 10, 20 years ago when it comes to running a business?
Wish I knew. Wow. I wish was it Tom Hanks who said, "This too shall pass." This will, to just know that tomorrow it's going to be okay. You think that I used to live with everything was live or die. Every decision was live or die. And I wish I didn't have that kind of a mentality. I have way less of that now. But, when we were going public, everyone wanted to know our cash balance. And you can't raise capital during that because you filed with the SEC. You're in a quiet period. But they all kept saying, "Well, what's your cash balance?" And you want to go, "Well, it's less than what you asked for yesterday because we can't raise any capital." And we're in a different business. I mean, we're even in a more stressful business because we are pre-revenue. So, I'll have people occasionally, and I'll have some shareholders who own their own businesses will say, "Well, Pete, you're not a real company unless you earn revenue." And I used to say, well, one guy was a air conditioning service guy. And, "Well, Pete, you're not a real company. I make millions servicing these equipment." I said, "Yeah, but I have to invent the equipment. It's different." Elon Musk, I think Tesla was 10 years before they came out with a car. So, that's a different phase of a company. And when you're selling someone else's product, or you're servicing someone else's product, you should probably be profitable in the first 6 months. But if you have to invent that product,
Unbelievable.
It's like Amazon. I think Amazon went 15 years without a net income. You know, and you go on those quarterly calls and listen to Jeff Bezos just stay positive, and the people were just, oh, you need to stop growing, you need to focus, and then one day everyone woke up and Amazon owned the world, right? And same thing with Elon Musk with Tesla. So you have to kind of be immune to the criticism, and you just have to keep plowing forward. And in ours, we're inventing something that nobody has ever invented before. We have our scientists in here today. We have them come in every quarter, and they do a presentation on what they're working on. It's just fascinating. One of my favorite meetings we have, and there's a lot of dialogue back and forth. And I told them today, you know, we were discussing the kind of where we're going as a company, and I said, listen, it's almost like you're on another planet. Every step you take, nobody has ever taken before. Nobody's ever done with fibroblasts what we're doing. It's a really special place to be.
What's it going to take to start getting these things? Is it just one person getting approved on the FDA side? When the floodgates open up, is it something in policy?
Well, I think that the approval process isn't going to change. You're still going to have to go through the stringent FDA IND process, investigational new drug process. I think what will happen when you get the first approval is that the investment market will open up a little more. So you'll have a little more access to capital. It may help your stock price a little bit, but I don't think it ever is going to change with the FDA and their stringent, and it probably shouldn't. I mean, we're putting cells into another human being, and you know, you want to make sure that you've done all the safety testing, all the toxicology testing, and that to make sure that we're not doing more harm than we're doing good. So you know, we don't bat an eye at the stringent process of approval of the FDA, and plus it's a huge barrier to entry. You can't just roll out of bed and say we're going to start a cell therapy company. You have to go through the same amount of work that we're going through.
So what's to kind of wrap it up at the end is what's the final vision for the company? Where do you see it in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have said, you know what, maybe our discovery's over with. Maybe we filed all the patents we're going to file. Maybe we need to just focus on that and get it public. And I would have been so wrong. We continue to file patents every month. I think we filed 3 last month. So what we're doing now is we're perfecting the manufacturing process, and we're patenting all of that. So what I would say, if you look at us 3 or 4 years from now, the goal would be to have a very healthy market cap, to have clinical programs approved and in patients, and to have additional platforms that we're developing in-house, all of it being organic.
I love it. I love it. Well, congrats on going public and the success. I mean, that's amazing. Where can everybody find the company and everything about it?
We're online, FibroBiologics.com. Our ticker symbol's FBLG. I think I'm wearing a...
There you go.
There you go. So you can check us out online. And we have a little area we call it for scientists only, but if you're really curious, you can go on there, and a lot of the papers are on there. And we're creating a little section in the next month or so for our chief scientific officer, so he can go on there and just blog and talk about what we're doing. I would say this. We are going to create something different that I don't really see from other companies at our stage, and we're going to release information out of the lab as we develop it. Most people develop it, go into a peer-reviewed paper, which can take 6 months. When the paper comes out, they go to a conference and they present their findings. We're going to be presenting it as it develops in the lab. If we can, if it's repeatable, and we can back it up with the data, we're going to release that information into the market.
I love that. I love that. Well, congratulations,
Great.
man.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Appreciate you coming on, and see you guys for the next episode. Appreciate it.